I was never one for believing in soulmates, but when I met Amanda, I began to think there might be some truth to it. She was electric. Long auburn hair that caught the sunlight like molten gold, green eyes sharp enough to cut through steel, and a laugh that echoed in my chest long after it stopped. I knew she was dangerous the moment I saw her, but isn't that the draw of fire? You can't help but reach out, no matter how sure you are it'll burn. Our marriage started with fireworks, the kind that leave you dizzy and breathless. We moved fast, too fast, looking back, and built a life together. A beautiful home on the outskirts of Denver, a solid savings account, and promises whispered late at night when the world was just us. It was perfect. Or so I thought. It started small, as these things always do. Amanda had taken up yoga, a cliché, sure, but she swore by the physical and mental transformation. I supported her, of course. She had a fire in her when she talked about it, the same fire that had drawn me to her in the first place. "You should come with me sometime," she said once, stretching her legs on the living room floor. I laughed it off, told her I'd stick to the weights. But I couldn't help but notice how she glowed after every session. At first, I chalked it up to her newfound hobby. She was happier, more vibrant. Her texts during the day were flirtier than ever, her kisses lingering just a little longer. But then she started to change. It was subtle: new lingerie, a sudden obsession with her skincare routine, nights out with her yoga friends. "You don't mind, do you?" she'd say, her voice light and teasing. "It's just a girls' night." I didn't mind. I trusted her. I trusted her so damn much I didn't think to ask questions when she came home late, smelling of wine and something faintly floral I couldn't place. Then there were the phone calls. She'd step outside when her phone rang, her voice muffled as she paced the backyard. "Work stuff," she'd say when I asked. "You know how demanding they are." I believed her. I didn't want to be the kind of husband who snooped through his wife's phone or tracked her movements. Love is built on trust, isn't it? But that trust became harder to maintain when I caught her one night, sitting in the dim glow of her phone at 2 a.m., her thumb moving rapidly across the screen. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice groggy from sleep. She jumped, clutching the phone to her chest like a lifeline. "Jesus, you scared me," she said, her laugh forced and brittle. "It's just Carla. She's having a meltdown over some guy. Go back to sleep, baby." But I didn't go back to sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, a knot forming in my stomach. Something was wrong. I could feel it. Amanda was slipping through my fingers, and I had no idea how to stop it. The tipping point came on our anniversary. I'd planned the evening weeks in advance, reservations at a swanky downtown restaurant, followed by drinks at the rooftop bar where I'd proposed. She was radiant that night, dressed in a slinky black number that hugged every curve. I was the envy of every man in the room. But when I leaned in to kiss her, I caught a scent that wasn't mine. It was subtle, musky, masculine, but it sent a jolt through me all the same. "Who have you been hugging?" I joked, trying to mask the unease that crept up my spine. Her eyes flickered for the briefest moment before she laughed. "The waiter, maybe? Or one of the guys at work? Relax, you're the only one I want." Her words were honey, but they didn't soothe me. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at her, wondering who she really was. The woman I loved, or someone I didn't know at all? The next morning, she left early for a yoga retreat. I kissed her goodbye, the unease from the night before still gnawing at me. Her phone buzzed on the counter as I poured my coffee. My hand hovered over it, my mind racing. She'd never been the type to lock her phone before, but recently, she'd started using a passcode. I told myself I was overreacting, that I was being paranoid. But as I watched her pull out of the driveway, her phone lighting up with another message from someone saved as "My yoga," I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. I grabbed the phone, staring at the screen, my heart pounding. If I was going to open Pandora's box, I had to be prepared for whatever came spilling out. The phone felt heavier than it should have, like it already carried the weight of the secrets I didn't want to uncover. Amanda hadn't always been secretive. When we first got together, we knew each other's phone passcodes, had shared accounts, and even laughed about how little privacy we had. But people change, don't they? And sometimes, they change in ways you don't see until it's too late. Her lock screen stared back at me, the simple time and date taunting me with how close I was to answers. I hesitated. Was I crossing a line? If I did this, there was no coming back. But that scent on her dress, the late-night texts, the sudden distance, it all painted a picture I couldn't ignore. I tried her birthday. Nothing. My birthday. Nothing. Then I remembered something. Last week, she joked about how she'd set her new passcode to something easy. I punched in our anniversary. The screen unlocked. I don't know what I expected. A flood of incriminating messages? Explicit pictures? Instead, it was worse, because everything seemed normal. Her messages were filled with her usual chats, a few with Carla, a couple with her sister, and one or two from her mom. But I kept scrolling, my stomach tightening with every swipe. Something felt off, even if I couldn't put my finger on it. Then I found it. Maya Yoga wasn't Maya. I clicked the chat, and immediately, my chest constricted. 9:12 a.m., can't stop thinking about last night. You were incredible. 9:15 a.m., wish I could see you today. When's the next retreat? I stared at the messages, my pulse roaring in my ears. There were no photos, no names, just those few lines of text, but they said enough. This wasn't innocent. This wasn't yoga. My hand trembled as I locked the phone and set it back on the counter. Amanda's lies had officially graduated from suspicion to fact. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. I poured it down the sink, gripping the edge of the counter so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My mind raced, trying to piece together what this meant. I needed to confront her, to ask who the hell Maya Yoga really was, but Amanda wasn't here. She was hours away, at some retreat I wasn't even sure was real anymore. I needed a plan. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Work emails blurred together, phone calls were cut short, and my coworkers probably thought I was losing it. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys, got into the car, and headed to the yoga studio Amanda always raved about. The building was unassuming, tucked between a strip of boutiques and an artisanal coffee shop. Inside, the receptionist greeted me with a practiced smile. "Hi there! How can I help you?" she chirped. "I'm looking for Amanda," I said, trying to sound casual. "She mentioned she'd be here for a retreat?" The receptionist frowned, tapping her keyboard. "Amanda King," I said. "Amanda King." She tapped a few more keys, her smile faltering. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any retreats scheduled this weekend. And I don't see anyone named Amanda King on the attendance list for today." My heart sank. "Are you sure? Maybe she booked under a different name?" The receptionist shook her head. "No retreats this weekend," she repeated. "But I can leave a message for her if she's one of our members." "No, that's fine," I muttered, turning to leave. The polite part of me thanked her, but my mind was already miles ahead. Amanda wasn't here. She hadn't been here. Whatever retreat she was on, it wasn't for yoga. Back at home, I went through the rest of her things with a methodical precision I didn't know I had. Every drawer, every closet, every corner of her side of the house was turned inside out. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew there had to be more. And there it was, hidden in her vanity, behind a clutter of old makeup brushes and half-used perfumes. A shoebox. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were scraps of a double life. Receipts for expensive dinners I hadn't attended. A hotel room keycard. And the final dagger, a card, handwritten in neat cursive. "Amanda, you make every moment worth living. Can't wait to see you again." I slammed the box shut, my blood boiling. This wasn't just a fling. This was something more. Something calculated. And Amanda thought she could get away with it. When she called that evening, her voice was as sweet as ever. "Hey, baby! she said, the sound of music and laughter in the background. Just wanted to check in. How's your day going? I gripped the phone tightly, my jaw clenched. Busy, I said curtly. How's the retreat? Oh, lots of meditation and mindfulness. It's been amazing so far, she said, her tone breezy. I wish you could be here. I'm sure you do, I said, forcing my voice to stay neutral. When do you get back? Tomorrow evening, she replied. But don't wait up, I'll probably be late. For a moment, I considered calling her out then and there. Telling her I knew she wasn't at a retreat, that I'd seen the messages, the receipts, the goddamn card. But no. That would be too easy. Too satisfying for her to deny and twist. Instead, I smiled to myself, though she couldn't see it. I'll see you when you get home, I said softly. And when she did, that's when everything would come crashing down. Amanda returned late the next evening, just as she'd promised. I heard her car pull into the driveway around 10, the low hum of the engine cutting through the stillness of the night. I sat in the living room, nursing a glass of bourbon and watching the clock tick by, my jaw tightening with every passing second. The shoebox sat hidden in my office upstairs, its damning contents waiting for the moment I decided to use them. When she walked in, she looked radiant. Her hair was freshly done, her cheeks flushed as though she'd just been laughing. She carried the unmistakable glow of someone who had enjoyed themselves immensely. Hey, babe, she called out, setting her bag down by the door. You're still up? I turned to look at her, forcing a smile. Yeah. Wanted to see how your retreat went. She came over to the couch, leaning down to kiss me on the cheek. That scent hit me again, floral, sweet, but not hers. It was faint, but it was there. She'd been with someone else. Oh, it was incredible, she said, sitting beside me and kicking off her shoes. So relaxing. Exactly what I needed. I swirled the bourbon in my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. That's good. What kind of stuff did you guys do? She hesitated for the briefest moment. The usual, yoga, meditation, group workshops. A lot of mindfulness exercises. It was really grounding. Her lies flowed so easily. I stared at her, wondering how many times she'd lied to my face like this. I wanted to confront her right then, to throw the shoebox on the table and demand answers. But no. I wasn't going to lose control. Not yet. That sounds nice, I said, taking a sip of bourbon to mask the edge in my voice. I'm glad you had a good time. Amanda's eyes flickered to the glass in my hand. Have you been drinking all night? She asked, a hint of disapproval creeping into her tone. I let out a dry laugh. Not all night. Just enough to think. Think about what? Life. Us. The future. I leaned back, keeping my gaze fixed on her. All the things we build our lives on. Her expression faltered for a split second before she plastered on that easy smile I'd fallen for so many years ago. You're in a weird mood tonight, she said, brushing it off with a laugh. Maybe you need a retreat too. Maybe, I said, my voice flat. The next day, Amanda slipped back into her usual routine as if nothing had changed. She hummed while making breakfast, kissed me goodbye before heading to work, and sent me a flirty text around lunchtime. She was a master of the facade, playing the role of the devoted wife to perfection. But now I saw through it all. Every move she made felt calculated, every smile hollow. I couldn't stop thinking about the messages, the card, the lies. By the time she came home that evening, I'd made my decision. It was time to stop pretending. Can we talk? I asked as she walked through the door. Amanda glanced at me, her smile faltering. Sure. What's up? I gestured toward the couch, and she hesitated before sitting down. I stayed standing, looming over her with the weight of everything I'd been holding in. Where were you this weekend? I asked, my tone steady but cold. Her brow furrowed. I told you. I was at the retreat. Really? I said, tilting my head. Because I went by the yoga studio, and they said there wasn't a retreat scheduled. Her eyes widened, just for a second, before she quickly masked her surprise. "That's strange," she said, her voice too casual. "Maybe they didn't know about it. It was a private event." I nodded slowly, letting her think she was still in control. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the card, tossing it onto the coffee table in front of her. Her face strained of color. "What's this?" I asked, my voice calm and measured. Amanda stared at the card, her lips moving as if to form an excuse, but no sound came out. "And what about these?" I continued, pulling out the receipts and the hotel keycard from the shoebox. I laid them out one by one, watching as her composure crumbled with every item. "Where did you get those?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's not the question you should be asking," I said, my tone sharp. "The question you should be asking is, how the hell did I let it get to this point?" She looked up at me, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice trembling. "Then tell me what it is," I said, crossing my arms. "Because to me, it looks like you've been screwing around behind my back. It looks like everything we've built together has been a lie." "It's not like that," she said, her voice rising. "I never meant for it to happen. It just happened." I laughed bitterly. "You never meant for it to happen, huh? That's the best you've got. You don't accidentally check into a hotel with someone. You don't accidentally send messages like the ones I saw." Amanda buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't know how to tell you." "You didn't know how to tell me?" I said, my voice dripping with disdain. "So instead, you just lied to me. Over and over again." She looked up at me, her tear-streaked face a picture of desperation. "Please, we can work through this. I'll do whatever it takes." But as I stared down at her, all I could feel was cold, detached clarity. This wasn't love. This wasn't a marriage. This was a betrayal so deep that it had hollowed out everything we'd once had. "No," I said, my voice firm. "You don't get to decide what happens next. I do." And with that I walked away, leaving her to sit alone in the wreckage of her lies. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with everything Amanda had said, or hadn't said. Her apologies, her excuses, her promises to fix things all felt hollow. This wasn't something you fixed. It was something you burned to the ground and walked away from. By dawn, I had a plan. This wasn't just about Amanda anymore. This was about me. About reclaiming the dignity she'd stripped from me. If she thought she was going to weasel her way out of this with empty words and crocodile tears, she was about to learn how wrong she was. Amanda tried to act like everything was fine the next morning. She was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, frying eggs and humming a tune like we weren't standing on the ruins of our marriage. "Good morning," she said, her voice overly cheerful. I didn't respond. I walked past her, poured myself a cup of coffee, and leaned against the counter, watching her with a cold, calculating stare. "You're not going to talk to me?" she asked, turning around to face me. "Do you want me to?" I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. She flinched but quickly recovered, her tone shifting to one of pleading. "Look, I know I messed up, okay? But we can work through this. We've been through so much together. Don't throw it all away." I laughed bitterly. "Throw it all away? You already did that, Amanda. The second you decided to sneak around behind my back." Her face crumpled, but I didn't care. I was done playing the role of the forgiving husband. "I need some time to think," I said, setting my coffee down and grabbing my keys. "Don't call me. Don't text me. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk." Without waiting for her response, I walked out the door, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. I spent the day meeting with my lawyer. "I want everything," I told her, my voice steady. Allison, my attorney, had seen this kind of thing before. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notepad. "Define everything," she said. "She doesn't get a dime," I said. "She doesn't get the house. She doesn't get the car. Nothing. I want her to walk away with what she came into this marriage with, less if possible. Allison raised an eyebrow. You're angry. That's understandable. But divorce law doesn't always work that way. We need to focus on the facts. What evidence do you have? I pulled out my phone and slid it across the desk. Messages. Receipts. A hotel keycard. You name it. She picked up the phone, scrolling through the screenshots I had saved. Her lips pressed into a thin line. This is a good start, she said. Infidelity can weigh heavily in your favor when it comes to asset division. But I'll need more if you want to ensure she walks away with nothing. Whatever it takes, I said. Do it. When I got home that evening, Amanda was waiting for me in the living room. She looked like she hadn't moved all day. Her hair was a mess, her eyes red and swollen. Where were you? She asked as I walked in. Out, I said curtly, heading for the stairs. Please, Jason, she said, following me. We need to talk. I stopped halfway up the stairs and turned to look at her. No, Amanda. You need to talk. I've already said everything I need to say. Her lips quivered. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry doesn't fix this, I said, my voice cold. You don't get to shatter my trust and then expect me to sweep the pieces under the rug. She broke down, sinking to the floor as sobs racked her body. I stood there for a moment, watching her. The sight didn't fill me with pity. It filled me with anger. Get up, I said finally, my tone firm. Crying won't change anything. If you want to fix this, start by telling me the truth. Who is he? Her sobs quieted, and she looked up at me with tear-streaked cheeks. It doesn't matter, she said, her voice barely audible. I clenched my fists. It matters to me. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, finally, she whispered, His name is Mark. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Mark. Her yoga instructor. Of course. The pieces fell into place. The late nights, the phone calls, the sudden obsession with yoga. How long? I asked, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. 6 months, she admitted, her eyes darting away. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of sneaking around, of making me feel like I was the crazy one for suspecting something was wrong. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked up the stairs, slamming the door to my office behind me. That night, I put the final pieces of my plan into motion. I called Allison and gave her the name. Mark, I said. He's the guy. I want every detail about him. Where he works, where he lives, everything. Jason, she said cautiously. Are you sure you want to go down this road? It's going to get messy. Messy doesn't scare me, I said. He's a part of this, and he's going to pay just as much as she does. All right, Allison said with a sigh. I'll see what I can dig up. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control. Amanda and Mark thought they'd gotten away with their betrayal, but they had no idea what was coming. The days that followed were a whirlwind of calculated precision. Amanda thought she was walking on eggshells, carefully tiptoeing around me, but she didn't realize I was the one laying the traps. Every glance, every hesitant word, every time she tried to brush my hand or cook a special dinner, it all reeked of desperation. She was holding on to an illusion, completely oblivious that I was about to burn it to the ground. Allison came through quicker than I expected. I found your guy, she said over the phone. Her tone was professional, but there was an undertone of curiosity. Mark Larson. Runs a boutique yoga studio downtown. Divorced, no kids. Seems clean on paper, but I ran a deeper search. And? I pressed, pacing my office as I clutched the phone. She hesitated. Turns out, he's been sued twice by former students. Both women. One accused him of harassment, the other of inappropriate conduct during sessions. Settled out of court both times. Not criminal charges, but it paints a picture. My grip tightened on the phone. Perfect. Send me everything you've got. Jason, listen. Her voice softened. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But this is getting personal. If you go after him like this, it might backfire. You need to think about how far you're willing to take this. Far enough to make sure either of them walks away clean. I said, my voice cold. Send me the files. Consider it done, she said with a sigh. That night, I pulled up the documents she sent me. Everything about Mark screamed predator. The way he positioned himself as a spiritual guru, how he got too close to his clients, how he manipulated vulnerable women. Amanda wasn't his first, and she probably wouldn't be his last. I knew what I had to do. The first step was gathering evidence, and that meant playing along with Amanda's facade for just a little while longer. I pretended to soften, letting her think her tears and apologies were starting to work. I even let her plan a date night, where she cooked dinner and wore one of the dresses I used to love. Thank you for giving me another chance, she said as we ate. Her voice trembled slightly, her guilt barely masked by her forced smile. I raised my glass to her, feigning sincerity. We've been through too much to throw it all away. She looked like she might cry again, but I didn't care. As she went on about how she'd make things right, my mind was already spinning with what I had planned for her and Mark. The next morning, I paid a visit to Mark's studio. The place was nauseatingly serene, soft music, essential oils wafting in the air, and dim lighting that made everything feel fake. I walked in, my heart pounding but my face calm. A woman at the front desk greeted me, her smile wide and welcoming. Hi there! Are you here for a class? No, I said. I was hoping to speak with Mark. Her smile faltered slightly. He's finishing up a session right now, but I can let him know you're here. What's your name? Jason King, I said, keeping my tone casual. Her eyes flickered with recognition, but she nodded and disappeared into the back. A few minutes later, Mark emerged. He was exactly the kind of guy I expected, mid-40s, fit, with a smug confidence that made my blood boil. His smile was smooth, practiced. Jason, he said, extending a hand. What can I do for you? I didn't take his hand. Instead, I looked him dead in the eye and said, We need to talk. Alone. His smile faltered, but he gestured toward a small office at the back of the studio. Once inside, I closed the door and leaned against it, crossing my arms. You know who I am, I said, my voice low. Mark hesitated, then nodded. I figured. Good. Then you know why I'm here. He sat down behind his desk, trying to maintain an air of authority. Look, Jason, I understand you're upset. Upset doesn't even begin to cover it. I snapped, cutting him off. You've been screwing my wife for 6 months, and you think I'm just going to let that slide? Mark opened his mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. You're not just a sleazebag who preys on married women, I said, throwing a folder onto his desk. You're a liability. 2 lawsuits for harassment. Settled out of court? How long until the next woman comes forward? His face turned pale as he flipped through the documents. Where did you get these? He asked, his voice shaking. Doesn't matter, I said. What matters is what I'm going to do with them. He looked up at me, his bravado completely gone. What do you want? I leaned in, my voice a cold whisper. You're going to end it with Amanda. Today. You're going to cut her off completely. No calls, no texts, no bullshit excuses. And if I find out you so much as glance in her direction again, I'll make sure these files land in the hands of every woman who's ever walked through your door. I'll ruin you. Mark swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Fine, he said. I'll end it. But… No buts, I growled. You don't get to negotiate with me. You do what I say, or I'll burn your life to the ground. He nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. When I got home that evening, Amanda was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I walked in, her expression hopeful. Hey, she said softly. I sat down across from her, my face unreadable. Mark's done with you, I said flatly. Her eyes widened. What? What are you talking about? I talked to him, I said, leaning back. He's cutting you off. No more messages, no more late nights, no more retreats. It's over. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't feel even a flicker of sympathy. How could you? She whispered. How could I? I echoed, laughing bitterly. That's rich, coming from you. I warned you, Amanda. I told you I wasn't going to let this slide. And this is just the beginning. Her tears turned to sobs, but I stood up, leaving her to wallow in the mess she'd made. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Amanda wasn't in bed when I woke up. The sheets on her side were cold, and the house was eerily silent. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if she'd finally packed her things and left. But then I heard it, the sound of soft, broken sobs coming from the kitchen. I walked down the stairs, my footsteps deliberate, and found her sitting at the table. Her face was pale, her eyes red and puffy, clutching her phone like it was the last thing tethering her to reality. When she looked up and saw me, she flinched. Did you really go to Mark? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I poured myself a cup of coffee, not bothering to answer right away. The air between us was heavy with tension, a suffocating mix of guilt and anger. I told you, I said finally, my tone cold and matter-of-fact. I'm not the man you can lie to anymore. If you thought I'd let you and your lover prance around unchecked, you were wrong. Her hands trembled as she set the phone down. He told me it's over. He said you threatened him? I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the bitterness. Good. Then he listened. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but they didn't move me. Not anymore. You don't understand, she sobbed. I never meant for it to go this far. I was lost. I felt disconnected from us and he. I slammed my mug down on the counter, cutting her off. Don't you dare try to justify this, Amanda. Don't you dare blame me for your choices. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't care. This wasn't about her tears or her regret. This was about showing her exactly what she'd destroyed. For the rest of the week, I focused on dismantling everything we'd built together. Every shared bank account, every joint subscription, every little thread that tied our lives into one, I unraveled it all. The first move was the house. The deed was in my name, something I'd insisted on when we bought it. Just in case, I'd said back then, not realizing how prophetic those words would become. Now, that decision was paying off. I met with Allison in her office, handing her a folder full of financial records. I want her out, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. She can take her clothes, her jewelry, and whatever else she brought into this house, but nothing else. Not a single piece of furniture, not a single picture frame. This is my house. Allison raised an eyebrow. And what about the divorce filing? Have you decided how you want to proceed? Full-on assault, I said. She gets nothing. No alimony, no assets, nothing. I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. She nodded, jotting down notes. It'll be a fight, especially if she pushes back. But if you've got the evidence to prove infidelity, we've got a strong case. I leaned back in the chair, a grim smile tugging at the corners of my lips. Oh, I've got plenty of evidence. The next bomb I dropped was the car. The sleek Audi Amanda loved so much was leased in my name. She drove it like it was hers, oblivious to the fact that I could take it away whenever I wanted. And that's exactly what I did. I called the leasing company and arranged for a repossession. 2 days later, a tow truck showed up in the driveway. What the hell is this? Amanda shrieked as she ran outside in her bathrobe. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching as the driver hooked her car up to the truck. Jason, stop this! She screamed, turning to me with wide, desperate eyes. This is what happens when you betray the person who gave you everything, I said, my voice steady. You lose it all. By the weekend, Amanda was unraveling. She spent most of her time in the guest room, avoiding me like I was a ghost haunting her every move. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I wanted her to feel the full weight of what she'd done, not just through financial ruin, but through the collapse of the world she'd so carefully constructed. On Sunday morning, I took the final step. I called her parents. "Jason, is everything okay?" her mother asked, her voice laced with concern. "Not really, Evelyn," I said. "I think you and Robert need to come over. We need to talk about Amanda." Her voice grew more worried. "What's going on? Is she hurt?" "No," I said. "But she's done something you need to know about." By noon, her parents were sitting in the living room, their faces etched with confusion and worry. Amanda sat stiffly on the couch, her eyes darting between me and them like a trapped animal. "Jason," her father began, his tone stern. "What's all this about?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Your daughter has been having an affair," I said bluntly. The room went silent, the weight of my words sinking in like a stone in water. "What?" Evelyn whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. 6 months, I continued. With her yoga instructor. I've got the receipts, the messages, everything. She's been lying to me, and she's been lying to you. Her parents turned to her, their faces a mixture of shock and disappointment. "Amanda," her father said, his voice shaking. "Is this true?" She broke down, sobbing into her hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she wailed. It just did." I stood up, towering over her as I delivered the final blow. "You didn't just betray me, Amanda. You betrayed everyone who believed in you. And now? Now you're going to deal with the consequences." Her father stood, his face red with fury. "We raised you better than this," he snapped. "What the hell were you thinking?" Amanda couldn't answer. She just sobbed, her world crumbling around her. And as I watched her parents turn their backs on her, walking out the door without another word, I realized I'd achieved exactly what I wanted. This wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. This was about making sure she felt every ounce of the pain she'd inflicted on me. And I wasn't done yet. Amanda barely left the guest room after her parents walked out. Her once confident aura had been replaced with something fragile, almost pathetic. She'd peek out occasionally, her eyes rimmed with red, her voice trembling whenever she tried to talk to me. I didn't care. Every crack in her facade felt like justice. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I still had one card left to play, and it was the cruelest one yet. That morning, I stood in the driveway, waiting for her to emerge. She eventually stepped outside, wearing an oversized hoodie and sweatpants, her hair a tangled mess. She looked nothing like the Amanda who used to turn heads wherever she went. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "I'm giving you a choice," I said, crossing my arms. Her brows furrowed. "A choice? You can stay in the guest room, live under my roof, and wait for the divorce to finalize," I said, my voice calm but icy. "Or you can leave today. Right now." She froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Jason, where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem," I said coldly. "You burned this bridge, Amanda. Now you can sink or swim." Her lip trembled, but she didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, she squared her shoulders, a flicker of her old defiance shining through. "Fine," she said. "I'll go." "Good," I replied, stepping aside so she could walk past me. I watched as she packed her things into 2 hastily stuffed suitcases. She left behind the designer clothes, the jewelry, the trinkets that once symbolized our life together. She knew they were mine now, just like everything else she'd lost. Before she left, she turned to me one last time. "You're not the man I thought you were," she said quietly. I chuckled, shaking my head. "No, Amanda. I'm not the fool you thought I was." She didn't have a response to that. She simply walked out the door, her suitcases dragging behind her. As the door slammed shut, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in months, I felt free. But Amanda's departure wasn't the end. The next day, I visited Mark's studio again. I wasn't there to talk this time. I was there to finish what I'd started. I'd spent the last week compiling every piece of evidence against him. The lawsuits, the inappropriate texts, the receipts from hotels he frequented with Amanda. It was all neatly organized in a thick manila folder. When I walked into his studio, the receptionist looked nervous. "He's in the back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded and strode past her, pushing open the door to Mark's office. He looked up, startled, as I dropped the folder on his desk. "What the hell is this?" he asked, his voice laced with annoyance. "It's your future," I said, my tone deadly calm. "Or what's left of it, anyway." He flipped through the pages, his face growing paler with each passing second. "You can't do this," he said, his voice trembling. "I can and I will," I said. "Unless you shut this place down. Today. You can't just destroy my business," he protested, standing up. I leaned in close, my voice a low growl. "You destroyed my marriage. Now I'm returning the favor." By the end of the day, the studio's doors were locked, and Mark's reputation was in shambles. I didn't feel guilty. Men like him thrived on manipulation, on exploiting people's vulnerabilities. He thought he could take what he wanted without consequence. He was wrong. But there was one final step left. Amanda's lies had stolen my peace, my trust, and my dignity. But she wasn't going to take my life. I met with Allison that evening, signing the final divorce papers. "She won't fight you on this," Allison said, sliding the documents into a folder. "Why not?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because you've taken everything from her," she said bluntly. I nodded, leaning back in my chair. "Good." When the divorce was finalized a week later, I sent Amanda one last message. "It's done. Don't contact me again." She didn't reply. Life slowly began to move on after that. The house was quieter, emptier, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. I spent my days working, rebuilding the life Amanda had tried to tear apart. But there was still a part of me that couldn't let go of the bitterness, the anger. I thought about her sometimes, wondering where she'd ended up, if she regretted what she'd done. And then, one day, I got my answer. It came in the form of a voicemail, left late at night. "Jason, it's me," Amanda's voice said, shaky and filled with tears. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I regret it all. Every single day." I deleted the message without listening to the rest. She'd made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. It's funny how quiet life becomes when you burn every bridge connected to your past. The house, once alive with laughter and the hum of a shared life, now echoed with nothing but silence. I thought I'd find peace in Amanda's absence, in knowing I had dismantled every last piece of her world. And for a while I did. But revenge has a way of eating at you from the inside. Even when you win, it leaves scars. It had been 3 months since Amanda left, 3 months since I forced Mark out of his studio and into whatever hole he crawled into. I'd buried myself in work, determined to fill every moment with purpose, but no amount of spreadsheets and meetings could drown out the weight of what I'd done, or the ache of betrayal that still lingered. Then, one day, her name resurfaced. I was at my usual coffee shop, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, when I overheard 2 women whispering in the corner. I wasn't paying much attention until I heard it. "Did you hear about Amanda King? She's staying at that rundown motel off Pine Street. Isn't that so sad?" I froze, my hand tightening around my coffee cup. "She used to have everything," the other woman said. "What happened to her? I thought she was married to that guy, Jason." "Divorce," the first woman whispered, lowering her voice. "Apparently she cheated, and he cut her off completely. Now she's broke." They laughed, the kind of pitying laugh reserved for people who relish the downfall of others. I left the coffee shop without finishing my drink. By the time I got to the motel, it was dusk. The neon sign flickered erratically, casting a sickly glow over the parking lot. It was the kind of place where lives fell apart, where secrets festered in the shadows. Her car, a beat-up sedan I didn't recognize, was parked near the entrance. I sat in my own car for a long time, staring at that faded vehicle, wondering why I'd even come. Was it curiosity? Guilt? Or just a need to see how far she'd fallen? Finally, I got out and walked to her door. Room 207. I knocked twice, my heart pounding in my chest. When the door opened, I barely recognized her. Amanda looked like a shadow of the woman I'd married. Her once perfect hair was limp and unkempt, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow. She was wearing an oversized sweatshirt, stained and threadbare, and for a moment, all I could do was stare. "Jason," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Can I come in?" I asked. She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder at the dingy room behind her, then stepped aside to let me in. The room was small, cramped, and smelled faintly of mildew. There was a single bed pushed against the wall, its sheets wrinkled and stained. A suitcase sat open on the floor, its contents spilling out in disarray. I stood in the center of the room, unsure of what to say. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I heard you were staying here," I said. "I wanted to see for myself." She laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and hollow. "So you came to gloat? To see how pathetic I've become?" "No," I said quickly. "I don't know why I came. I wanted to know if you're okay." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Do I look okay, Jason?" I didn't answer. For the next hour, she talked. She told me how Mark had disappeared after I confronted him, how his business collapsed, and he blamed her for it. She told me about losing her job after her affair became public knowledge, how her friends had abandoned her, how her parents barely spoke to her anymore. "I tried to start over," she said, her voice cracking. "But everywhere I go, it's like a scarlet letter. Everyone knows what I did. No one wants to give me a chance." Her tears spilled over, and she buried her face in her hands. "I ruined everything, Jason. I ruined us. I ruined my life." For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt a pang of something I didn't expect: pity. She was broken, shattered into pieces I wasn't sure could ever be put back together. And as much as I hated her for what she'd done, I couldn't help but feel the weight of my own actions, the part I'd played in her downfall. As I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the image of her sitting in that motel room, drowning in regret. Had I gone too far? Was there a line I'd crossed in my quest for revenge? These questions gnawed at me, keeping me awake long into the night. I told myself she deserved it, that she'd brought this on herself. But no matter how many times I repeated those words, they didn't erase the sinking feeling in my chest. Revenge might have given me power, but it hadn't given me peace. And as the days turned into weeks, I began to wonder if it ever would. The days following my visit to Amanda's motel were heavy with reflection. Seeing her like that, broken, penniless, a ghost of the vibrant woman I had once loved, did something to me. For months, I had focused on revenge, on dismantling her life piece by piece, but now, standing on the ashes of it all, I wasn't sure what I felt anymore. I wasn't happy. I wasn't satisfied. I was hollow. Revenge had been the fire that kept me warm, but now the flames were dying, and all I had left were cold embers. Amanda didn't contact me after that night, and I didn't reach out to her. But the image of her in that motel room stayed with me, creeping into my thoughts at the most unexpected times. I'd be at work, running through budgets or presentations, and suddenly I'd see her tear-streaked face. I'd be lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, and her whispered words, "I ruined everything, Jason. I ruined us." Would echo in my mind. I had won. But what did winning mean when the battlefield was littered with the wreckage of a life we built together? One evening, a knock at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. I opened it to find Evelyn, Amanda's mother, standing there. She looked older, her shoulders hunched, her face lined with worry. "Evelyn," I said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" She glanced past me into the house before meeting my eyes. "Can I come in?" I need to talk to you. I hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let her in. We sat in the living room, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. Finally, she broke it. It's about Amanda, she said, her voice quiet. My chest tightened. What about her? She's not doing well, Evelyn said, her hands wringing together. She's spiraling, Jason. After everything that happened with you, with Mark, with the divorce, she's lost. I don't think she has anything left. I looked away, my jaw tightening. She did this to herself, Evelyn. She made her choices. I know, Evelyn said quickly. I'm not here to make excuses for her. I know she betrayed you, and I know you had every right to do what you did. But Jason, she's still my daughter. Her voice cracked. And I'm afraid of what might happen to her if someone doesn't step in. I closed my eyes, the weight of her words pressing down on me. What do you want me to do? I asked finally, my voice low. Evelyn hesitated, then said, I just need you to talk to her. Maybe help her see that this isn't the end, that she can still turn her life around. She listens to you, Jason. She always did, even when she was making the worst decisions. I let out a bitter laugh. She listened? Is that why she cheated on me for 6 months? Is that why she lied to my face over and over again? Evelyn flinched but didn't back down. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But Jason, this isn't about you anymore. It's about her survival. I spent the rest of the night wrestling with the decision. Part of me wanted to leave her to her fate. She had destroyed my trust, humiliated me, and shattered the life we'd built together. Why should I care what happened to her now? But another part of me, deeper, quieter, still remembered the woman I had fallen in love with. The woman who used to light up my life in ways no one else ever had. And maybe, just maybe, that part of me couldn't bear to see her fall any further. The next day, I drove back to the motel. When Amanda opened the door, her expression shifted from surprise to something unreadable. Jason, she said, her voice soft. What are you doing here? I stepped inside, the familiar scent of mildew hitting me again. She hadn't cleaned up much since my last visit. We need to talk, I said. She sat down on the edge of the bed, watching me warily. About what? About what happens next? I said, pulling a chair from the small table and sitting across from her. She let out a bitter laugh. Next? There is no next, Jason. This is it. This is my life now. It doesn't have to be, I said firmly. But if you're going to dig yourself out of this hole, you need to start now. Her eyes filled with tears. And how am I supposed to do that? No one will hire me. I can't even afford a real apartment. What am I supposed to do? I leaned forward, my gaze steady. You rebuild. You take responsibility for what you've done, and you rebuild from the ground up. No more excuses. No more self-pity. You figure out what kind of life you want, and you fight for it. Amanda stared at me, her tears spilling over. Why are you here, Jason? She whispered. Why do you care what happens to me? For a moment, I didn't know how to answer. But then I said, because no matter how much I hate what you did, I can't pretend you didn't mean something to me. And I don't want to watch you destroy yourself. She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. I let her cry, saying nothing, offering no comfort. This was her burden to carry, her redemption to find. When she finally looked up, her face was streaked with tears, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, determination. Okay, she said quietly. I'll try. I nodded, standing up. Good. But don't mistake this for forgiveness, Amanda. I'm not here to save you. I'm just giving you the chance to save yourself. She didn't say anything as I walked to the door. But as I stepped outside, I heard her voice, soft and broken. Thank you? Months passed after that day at the motel. I didn't hear from Amanda again, and honestly, I didn't expect to. Our lives had splintered too far apart, the wreckage of what we once shared scattered in different directions. I focused on moving forward, trying to rebuild the life I'd been so desperate to protect. For the first time in years, I started doing things for myself. I joined a gym, reconnected with old friends, and even began dating again. It wasn't easy. Every time I got close to someone, a part of me pulled back, terrified of being vulnerable again. But I pushed through, determined not to let Amanda's betrayal define the rest of my life. One quiet Friday evening, as I sat on my back porch sipping a beer, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw a name I hadn't expected to see, Amanda. For a long moment, I just stared at the notification. Part of me wanted to delete it without reading it, to keep the door firmly closed. But curiosity won out. The message was short. Jason, I just wanted to say thank you. For what you said that day. It hurt, but it woke me up. I'm working now, nothing glamorous, but it's a start. I'm staying sober too. I know you probably don't care, but I thought you should know. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you find happiness. I stared at the message, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. Relief. Closure. And something I couldn't quite name, maybe the faintest flicker of hope that she'd finally found the strength to rebuild her life. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Life went on. The divorce had stripped away the illusions of my marriage, but it had also given me a strange kind of freedom. I'd survived the storm, and now I was finally standing in the calm. Then, one day, I ran into her. It was in a small cafe downtown, the kind of place she would have loved when we were still together. I was sitting by the window, scrolling through my phone, when I looked up and saw her at the counter. She was different. Healthier. Happier even. Her hair was neatly tied back, and she wore a simple dress that suited her in a way I hadn't seen in years. I considered slipping out before she saw me, but it was too late. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Jason, she said, walking over. Her voice was steady, but there was a softness to it I didn't recognize. Amanda, I said, nodding. Do you mind if I sit? I gestured to the chair across from me. Go ahead. She sat down, setting her coffee on the table. For a few moments, we didn't say anything. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was just there. You look good, she said finally, offering a small smile. So do you, I replied. She nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. I wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again. Me neither, I admitted. Another pause. Then she said, I'm sorry. For everything. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know that I mean it. What I did to you, to us, it was unforgivable. I studied her face, searching for any trace of manipulation or deceit. But all I saw was sincerity. I've moved on, I said finally. But I won't lie, what you did left scars. It changed me. I know, she said, her voice trembling. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. To make something of my life again. I nodded, leaning back in my chair. That's good, Amanda. I hope you find what you're looking for. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she didn't cry. She just smiled, a small, bittersweet smile. Thank you, she said softly. We sat there for a few more minutes, talking about nothing in particular, the weather, work, the little things that didn't matter but somehow filled the space between us. When she left, I watched her walk out the door, disappearing into the crowd. That night, as I sat on the porch again, I thought about her. Not with anger or bitterness, but with a strange kind of acceptance. She had been a part of my life, a chapter filled with both joy and pain. And while I'd never forget what she did, I realized I didn't need to hold on to the anger anymore. I wasn't forgiving her. I wasn't forgetting. I was just letting go. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I finally felt free.